Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Ashley, and on this channel, we like to talk about stuff like the paranormal, unsolved mysteries, and of course, true crime. Now, in today's story, I actually want to talk about something a little bit different. It is a little bit unusual. It falls more into the theories, strange theories of the world, and that would be about Hollow Earth. Now, this has been a topic that has interested me for quite a while. And, at the beginning, when I first heard about it, I was skeptical, like I'm sure a lot of us are when we first hear about really out there theories. We think everyone is crazy. We think that it's just not possible. But recently, there have been a few developments in the scientific world that have made me take a second look at this theory. So like I said, today we're going to talk about Hollow Earth, or also known as Agartha. So like I said earlier, I wasn't a full-on believer in this idea. I thought it was a little bit outlandish. I thought it kind of fell into the realm of Atlantis where, there's potentially some ideas that it could be real, but then, there's developments that have come forward that are making me and a lot of people think twice. So in the past few years, scientists have actually made a very interesting discovery. And while they haven't been able to 100% prove it yet, it's only because they haven't found a way to get there. And that would be the theory that there is actually an ocean deep inside the earth. So science suggests that there's actually this ocean reservoir hidden way beneath the earth, approximately 400 miles deep. And they actually think that this ocean reservoir is so huge that it could actually fill up the earth's oceans 3 times over. And then there's that saying, where there's water, there is life. So obviously it's giving people, a lot to think about what else could possibly be down there. The second development that actually just happened this past year was the giant sinkhole that was discovered in China. And the most shocking thing about it is that it literally had a full-on forest growing all the way at the bottom of this hole. So it was about 600 feet deep. And initially, they could see that there was some vegetation growing. They could see that there was something inside this hole. But when they actually were able to go in and take a closer look, they actually discovered that there were ancient trees growing at the bottom of this sinkhole that were growing well past 100 feet tall. So, if there's ancient trees growing at the bottom of the hole, what else is there? It's making scientists think there could possibly be undiscovered species that are down there as well. And when you think about it, it makes a lot of sense that there's things that we haven't discovered. We've only explored a portion of the ocean. We haven't been able to go past a certain amount of depth. 100% certain that there are species that we haven't quite discovered yet. And the same applies to when you start talking about digging into the earth. We've barely scratched the surface. The furthest anyone has dug into the crust of the earth was actually done by the Kola project in 1989, where they only made it 7 kilometers in, which is only 1/3 of the way through the crust. Unfortunately, they did have to stop because it was just getting way too hot for their equipment, so it just basically kept melting. But to fully understand the significance of all this and to understand the entire theory, let's scale it back a little bit and go down history. So the origin of Hollow Earth actually goes way, way back to ancient times. If you take a look throughout history across the entire planet, you'll see almost everyone has a variation of what Hollow Earth has become. And it's believed that Hollow Earth actually started as a derivative of hell or the underworld for a lot of these ancient cultures. According to ancient Greek mythology, there are caves across Greece that lead to an entrance to these underworlds that are also home to an ancient god called Zakmosis. A similar theory exists in Celtic mythology, where they believe that the gates across Ireland led to the underworld. Then there is Shambhala, the Tibetan mythical kingdom that translates to a place of peace. Now, traditionally, Buddhists believe the entrance to Shambhala is located somewhere in the Himalayan mountains, and those who set out to look for it usually die along the way. However, there is believed to be one caveat, and if you are one of those lucky people that are able to find these entrances, it is said that only those of pure heart, mind, and soul are able to enter. It also appears in Native American mythology, where they believe that their ancestors actually emerged through a subterranean land through a cave at the Mississippi River. And there's also the belief that the Hopi people actually believed that the Grand Canyon is an entrance to the underworld. There's actually a very interesting theory and a very interesting story about what is supposedly underneath the Grand Canyon. And I could essentially make an entire video on this because there's so much to go into. But for the sake of this video, so it's not 3 hours long, I'll give you guys a little bit of a summary. So essentially, in 1909, a man named Mr. Kincaid and the Smithsonian Institute actually discovered a very unique entrance that led to a cave. So it was said to have had a very long passage, approximately 1,400 feet, that ended up leading to a very large chamber. And at the bottom of this tunnel, there was another very large chamber, and it was unique. The thing about this chamber was that it actually had a bunch of connecting tunnels to it, almost like a spinning wheel, where there's a center and then there's a bunch of connecting tunnels all around it, which led to other portions of this cave. Now, throughout these tunnels, there was quite a lot of interesting artifacts discovered, including specific artifacts that you wouldn't expect to find on this side of the world. Now, Mr. Kincaid, along with the Institute, they actually came across what they said were hieroglyphs, along with a tomb that actually had some mummies inside of it. And as they continued to explore this cave and all of these tunnels, it was so large that they actually estimated that 50,000 people could comfortably be hiding down there. Now, this was a pretty big deal at the time. It would still be today. And it was actually published in the Arizona Gazette. And after that initial story, there was just never any follow-up. Essentially, it was almost as if the story disappeared and no one really wanted to let the public know about what was happening. So as you can imagine, there's been a lot of speculation about what happened here. Like, was it a real thing? Did he actually discover something? Was it made up? Was it a government cover-up? Was it a hoax? And on top of this, the Smithsonian Institute has actually denied ever being part of this expedition. There's no records of it, and they've completely denied the entire experience, which to me sounds quite suspicious. Now we move on to the time of the Vikings and the story of Eric the Red. Now, he was the first Viking to actually discover Greenland. His goal here was to create a new settlement away from Northern Europe, and he was actually able to successfully do this, luring over dozens of boats filled with new settlers to Greenland. By 985, he had actually created a brand new settlement. There was a growing population. However, by the year 1424, something strange happened. By this point, the Vikings had been living there for 400 years, and they had started their own version of record keeping, kind of keeping track of their history, of any significant events going on. However, at a certain point in this year of 1424, the records completely stopped. It was almost as if they had vanished from this area. And if you look this up on Google, there are plenty of theories and speculations as to what could have happened, why these Vikings decided to completely abandon their settlement. Of course, there are practical explanations. Some people believe that the weather had something to do with it. Maybe there was a famine. Maybe there was a disease. But there are speculations on the other side that follow more into the hollow earth theory. Now, if you were to ask the Inuits that live on Greenland today, passed down from their ancestors, what they say happened is that the white man actually traveled to a place called the Land of Endless Summer. Now, there's no elaboration on what this could potentially mean, but as we go further into the theory, you'll see it connect a little bit more. Now, this is just the tip of the iceberg. Like I said at the beginning of the video, if you look across other ancient cultures, other ancient groups of people, especially in South America, Central America, Sumeria, across Europe, you'll see that they all have some sort of underground world that was home to gods or where people have gone to hide. So as we progress through history, we start moving towards more of a scientific approach. And we actually come across a new theory proposed by a man named Edmund Haley in the 17th century. Now, he was quite an accomplished person. He was an astronomer, a geophysicist, a physicist, a mathematician, and a meteorologist. And if you didn't catch it earlier, he was actually the one that discovered Halley's Comet, and it was actually named after him. He was the one that was able to predict the return of Halley's Comet in 1758. Although he didn't live to see it, he was able to successfully predict the cycle of the comet. Now, when it comes to hollow Earth, he actually believed that the Earth had multiple levels to it going inwards. So he predicted that the first outer shell of the Earth was approximately 800 kilometers deep, followed by another sphere. And I'll insert a picture here so you guys can see. It was approximately 800 kilometers thick at the first level, with two more of these shells further in, which created spheres within spheres. Each of these shells having their own north and south poles, and at the center of it all would have been a solid core. He imagined that the interior of hollow Earth was actually quite luminous, and also believed that the escaping gases from the north and south poles could be a potential explanation for the northern lights, also known as aurora borealis. Throughout the 19th century, multiple people started expanding on this initial theory by Haley, suggesting that there were multiple entrances, not just at the North Pole, but also at the South Pole. Now, this created even more momentum, and there was books that were published about this. There were more theories, there were plays, stories, and this actually resulted in a man named John Sims actually becoming quite obsessed with the theory of hollow Earth, so much so that he actually ended up devoting his entire life to researching it. So, like I said, John Sims devoted his entire life to hollow Earth, and his goal was actually to travel to the center of the Earth. Sadly, he was not able to actually do this, but throughout his research, he did create some interesting theories. Now, I'll put some photos so you guys can follow along, but essentially, his theory said that Earth was made up of 5 solid spheres within each other, with 2 openings on outer Earth, each at the north and south poles. He imagined that within the Earth was a warm and rich land stocked with vegetables, animals, and potentially a form of human. Sadly, he ended up dying. Of course, he didn't make his goal come true, but his enthusiasm and all of his research actually ended up sparking the first expedition to Antarctica in 1838. Now we move forward to the early 1900s and the time of Admiral Bird. Now, this is a very popular part of hollow Earth theory. I would say it's probably the most well-known, the most well-received experience when it comes to hollow Earth. So Admiral Bird was of the US Navy, and he was a very well-respected man, and he actually conducted multiple trips to the Arctic territory. And throughout all of these trips, he actually had a diary where he recorded almost everything that he saw. And it was a few of these journal entries that led to the theories that we are going to talk about in this video. So the first one takes place in 1947, and like I said earlier, he was in the Navy and he was a pilot. So in that year, he was actually flying over the North Pole when he came across something extremely unusual. In his journal entry, he said that as he was flying over the North Pole, he came across a hole that essentially went inside of the Earth. And within this hole, he said he was able to see what looked like a warm tropical climate and was home to creatures that he described as resembling the extinct woolly mammoth. And on top of this, he also said that he actually came into contact with a form of humans. So obviously curious that there's this giant hole at the top of the Earth, he goes in with his plane when he's actually intercepted by what he described as flying saucers. They actually escorted him into the hollow Earth and actually helped him land, where he was greeted by who he describes as the leaders of hollow Earth. And because Admiral Bird was a very well-respected man, he was often described as a man of character, a very humble man, a man that had a lot of values. The leaders of hollow Earth decided to give him a very important message that they wanted him to take back to the leaders of Earth. Now, what these leaders told him was that they were very concerned about humanity's use of atomic bombs, especially during the time of Hiroshima, which had happened approximately 20 years earlier. And they had actually said that they tried to intercept and tried to stop these bombs from going off, but instead their aircraft was actually shot down. So with this, they urged Admiral Bird to return back to Earth, warn humans about using nuclear weapons. It was just something that humanity was not ready and not able to fully control, let alone understand. So Bird returns to the Pentagon and he delivers this message, but to his surprise, he's actually sworn to secrecy. He's told to never talk about this again and reminded that he works for the country. That same year, Bird actually led an expedition to Antarctica. Now, the original message that was made public about this mission was for research, but people became quite suspicious when it was found out how many soldiers were actually sent along with Bird down to Antarctica. What they were actually doing was looking for any Nazis that had actually escaped from Germany down south. A lot of them had gone down to Argentina, and it was a well-known fact that the Nazis had bases down in Antarctica. So essentially, they were going down there to capture them. This operation would later become known as Operation High Jump, and Bird, along with 4,700 other military personnel, went down south. However, their expedition was actually cut quite short. Just 8 weeks later, they had to return back because of a high number of casualties. On their way back to the States, they were actually passing through Chile, where Admiral Bird came across news reporters where they were asking him what happened. They were asking for details on the story, any developments. And to their surprise, he actually told them something quite shocking. He tells them that they had encountered a new enemy unknown to man that could travel at light speed from one pole to the other. That would be the only time that Bird would speak about what happened publicly. But as you can imagine, with something like this happening, there were some leaks. So at the time, the Soviet Union actually had spies integrated inside of the US, and they actually ended up revealing that the US came across some UFOs that no one had ever experienced before. And it was true that they were traveling at very high speeds. And what ended up happening is that these UFOs attacked the entire expedition, destroying as many boats and as many aircrafts as it possibly could. Then there was the story of 2 US Navy men that were actually on the expedition. And they said that these UFOs actually came out of the ocean. And this is exactly what they said. The thing shot vertically out of the water at tremendous velocity, as though pursued by the devil, and flew between the masts of the ships at such high speed that the radio antenna oscillated back and forth in its turbulence. An aircraft from the Currituck that took off just a few moments was later struck with an unknown type of ray from the object, and almost instantly crashed into the sea near our vessel. About 10 miles away, the torpedo boat Maddox burst into flames and began to sink. Having personally witnessed this attack by the object that flew out of the sea, all I can say is that it was frightening. However, as you can imagine, there are plenty of skeptics out there that claim Bird's journal entries were fake, that all of these stories were untrue. Some people even speculate that Bird never actually flew to the North Pole based on the type of plane that he had. There's speculation that his plane just simply wouldn't have been able to make it up there. But it did give us a few interesting stories to think about. Now, while we're here during the time of World War II, we can go into a little bit about what the Nazis thought about Hollow Earth. Now, it's a well-known fact that the Nazis were into some very obscure stuff. You know, they conducted a lot of human experiments. They also had very strange beliefs. And one of them was actually about Hollow Earth. They had actually heard about Shambhala, the Tibetan kingdom that I had talked about earlier in the video, and they took a very keen interest in this, so much so that they actually set an expedition to the Himalayan mountains in 1938. But to fully understand why the Nazis were so interested in Hollow Earth and Shambhala, we have to give a little bit of context. So as we all know, the Nazis were obsessed with the Aryan race. They considered this race to be perfect. They considered it to be elite. And prior to the start of World War II, they were actually highly focused on discovering the origin of the Aryan race. And this ended up leading them to the story of Atlantis. So when it comes to the story of Atlantis, I think it's a fairly common belief of what these people were believed to look like. You know, everyone thinks they look like these super tall humans, very white hair, very pale skin, big eyes. And coincidentally, this also matches the description of one of the alien races that have been talked about quite publicly, known as the Pleiadians. And like I said earlier, this description basically matched the Nazis' ideal type of human. So like I said, the Nazis believed that Atlantis was the origin of the Aryan race, and at the time they believed that Atlantis was actually located somewhere between England and Portugal in the Atlantic Ocean. When Atlantis sank, it's believed by the Nazis that those that managed to survive the initial tragedy were able to escape to different parts of the world, and one of these locations was actually in the Himalayan mountains. And it's believed that they chose this location because of its high altitude, and the Himalayas were also known as the roof of the world. Then when the Nazis heard about Shambhala and it being located in the Himalayan mountains, this kind of connected the theory for them. They believed that the Aryan race and Shambhala were basically the same thing. So with their expedition taking place in 1938, they sent several men, and I'll put some pictures here for you guys to see. They sent several men to Tibet looking for the entrance to Shambhala. However, according to their records, they didn't find anything, but word of mouth says otherwise. Stories have been passed down that the Nazis actually did discover the entrance to Shambhala, and what ended up happening was that they were actually rejected entrance because of their negative energy, their values that they stood for just had nothing to do with what Shambhala stood for. So they were actually rejected. And instead of being let in, the people of Shambhala actually offered to come to Germany in order to help enlighten people and to talk more about spirituality, which obviously did not happen. After the war, there were some interesting letters discovered on a German U-boat, which is actually a submarine. These maps are actually believed to give instructions on how to get to Agartha via Antarctica. And these letters were suspected of being written by Karl Unger, a U-boat navigator who claimed that they had successfully reached the entrance of Agartha underwater. They were so obsessed with this theory that some even speculate that Hitler didn't actually die at the end of World War II and that he actually escaped to Hollow Earth via the entrance in Antarctica. And this is actually fueled by another interesting piece of information. After the war, approximately 2,000 of the best scientists from Italy and Germany also vanished and were never accounted for. So is it possible that Hitler did escape and he took some of his best researchers with him? Now, if you move forward to more modern times, we have technology on our side now, and this is exactly what people worldwide are using to, really find out whether Hollow Earth exists and if these holes at the North and South poles are a real thing. One of the reasons this sparked interest was because people started noticing that airplanes were actually not allowed to fly over a very specific region in the North Pole, and I'll put an image for you guys to see. There are rules, there are laws here by the United States that air traffic is simply not allowed to fly over this specific zone. Now, of course, there could be practical explanations for this. It could be dangerous weather conditions, but many people seem to think otherwise. So let's take a look here at some videos and images that actually come from NASA. If you look at these videos, there's one of the Aurora Borealis, and you can see that there's a dark hole that's just consistent there in the middle in that one particular spot. Now, this goes back to Haley's theory about where the northern lights were coming from and that they were coming from these entrances. So as you can see in this video, it kind of looks like the lights are swirling, kind of like a funnel from that dark hole. However, if you were to look on Google Maps, and I suggest you guys go do this for yourself so you can see, if you look on Google Earth Maps, you can see that there's no sign of a hole at all. Then if you look at these old images provided by NASA, you can see a hole in the North Pole. However, if you look up more recent images also provided by NASA, you either won't see a hole at all in that region or it's blocked out. Now there's this video and it claims to be authentic, but I will leave that for you guys to decide. It's allegedly a recording of the entrance of Hollow Earth leaked by someone at NASA. It was supposedly shot from the space shuttle STS-80 USA in 1996. And it's quite blurry, but it looks to be like the entrance at the North Pole going inside, and you can see it kind of just swirling slowly, almost like a funnel. Then there are a few other photos that I also came across online that I wanted to share with you guys. Now, I don't know if these are photoshopped, but they do claim to be authentic. There are some that are obviously photoshopped, and I haven't included those. But these are the ones that are left a little bit ambiguous. And with that, it brings us to the end of this video. So the question obviously remains, is this all just a bunch of, mumbo jumbo? Is this all just a bunch of crazy people making up some crazy theories? Or is there truth to Hollow Earth? Personally, I think it probably lies somewhere in the middle. I think there are likely some resources within Earth. I think that there could potentially be some ancient bacteria down there, with all of these sinkholes forming and all of these caves that we're constantly finding. There's also one in Vietnam that was found. I suggest you guys Google that. But I think there's definitely something that's to be discovered beneath the Earth, and we don't know what's actually down there just because we haven't been able to get there. But I honestly would not be surprised if somehow we were able to find a form of life or, just stuff that we wouldn't have expected to be down there. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Is Hollow Earth a real thing? What do you guys think is down there? I don't necessarily think we're going to find anything like that movie King Kong and Godzilla, where they go into Hollow Earth and it's just like an entire magical kingdom, but who knows? Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. And if you have any other case suggestions or any other theories or topics in general that you want me to talk about, also leave them in the comments below. I'm always on the lookout for something interesting to talk about. All right, let's wrap up this video. That's it for today, guys. Thank you for joining me, and I will see you guys in the next one.